Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Re-Educating Dad podcast with me, Tony Coe, and my co-host daughter, who is also Tony Coe, but I call her Little Tone.
Because someone needed to name someone after themselves, like Henry VIII.
So, Little Tone and I rarely get together for podcasting. We started a podcast. I won't go over the whole history again, but we started the Re-Educating Dad podcast back when COVID hit as something to do while we were all locked away. And I think we did over 80 episodes covering all kinds of subjects. And we had well, speaking for myself, I had great fun doing that with Little Tone. And every time I go traveling and meet friends from around the world, they always say, when are you going to do another Re-Educating Dad episode with Little Tone? Because she's very popular. So they mention it all the time. So here we are, we're back. But I didn't, all the subjects we have covered, and we've covered many, many topics, I never thought I'd be discussing this one. But there you go. That's the kind of podcast this is. We cover all sorts of stuff, and I learn all sorts of stuff about my lovely daughter. So since we quietened down on our own podcast, we've both gone off and done podcasts, separate podcasts. I do one called Refinement, Not Retirement, which I hope everyone who hasn't listened to it will check that out. Again, we cover all kinds of topics there, and it's getting quite hot at the moment as Christine and I, my wife, cover the Trump criminal trial. So that's getting fun and interesting. But Little Tone has started a podcast of our own, which I've been listening to yesterday. And tell us about your podcast, and then just introduce our subject today.
What is the name of my podcast, Dad? Do you know the name?
Yes, it's called the Embracing Magic, spelt in a rather interesting way, podcast. But thanks for that first
Ah,
test.
yeah, well done. That's really good. You have been listening to it. I thought
Yeah.
that you wouldn't remember it.
Yeah.
Um, my friends and I, Steph from Lunar and Wild, and my friend Lizzie, who's a Coven member, started a podcast. We've done about 6 episodes and released 4 or 5, I think. And we basically meet up once a month and we record 3 in a podcast studio that Steph's partner owns. And we basically talk very candidly about our practice with witchcraft.
Yo, spooky. Well,
I don't think it's spooky at all. Um, the whole idea of the podcast is it's basically 3 friends having very relaxed, real conversations about the way that we implement witchcraft into our everyday life. And it's really quite original for the UK because most of these podcasts about witchcraft exist in America. And they are quite inaccessible, because they come from this place of privilege where people are able to sort of get up at 5 a.m. and go for silent walks in kimonos and drink ceremonial cacao and then, have prayer sessions. And, that's not the reality of how people normally live. We're getting up and rushing to work and, walking our dogs and feeding our children and stuff like that. So we just felt that that was not a great representation of what the average witch lives like. And so we thought we'd do something a bit more real, and it's really taken off. I mean, we've just been I'm not sure when is, I don't know if I can say this. When is this coming out, this podcast
oh, this will
episode?
come out within a few hours.
Okay, well, I can't give any names, but we've just been nominated for quite a good award in the
Oh,
podcast.
great.
Sorry, in the wellness industry. And we'll be announcing on Sunday. But we've got 2,000 followers and 700 subscribers. So for a podcast that's been out for like 4 or 5 episodes, that's pretty amazing.
That is fantastic. Well, you do have a lovely chemistry between you. That's what,
Yeah, we
yeah,
do.
it's
We're really back.
lovely. It's very nice to listen to. Now, but let's get down to the brass tacks here. Are you in fact a witch?
Yes, that felt really scary, you saying that to me like that. Like you were like, ban her. Are
But
you a
you mean burn her?
yeah, burn her, yeah.
That's what's normally associated with witches, isn't it? The burnings.
It's
Uh,
still associated with witches because it still happens.
well, let's start with that question. So you've answered the question, are you a witch? Yes. So can you explain what to people who know absolutely nothing about this other than the folklore and the burnings and all that sort of stuff? Can you explain what a witch is?
A witch is someone that practices witchcraft, lives their life by the phases of the moon, lives in tune with the seasons of nature, cyclical nature of the environment. There are Sabbats throughout the year that we celebrate to represent different parts of the year. So, for instance, most people will be aware of Samhain, which is around Halloween, and it's the witch's new year. It's when our year starts, and it's about celebrating the last, the last harvest before we go into the winter period, which is a time of sleep and reflection and slumber and you know preparation, and go into the state of rest before we come into Imbolc at the beginning of February. That's the time for sort of like quiet introspection, and then it basically just follows the seasons of the rest of the year. You move into sort of like Beltane and Letha at some point, and Lunarsad, and these all represent the changing of this big wheel, which is um they're basically different names for what we have for like seasons. We might have like summer, winter, um spring, autumn. That's not the right order. Spring,
We
summer,
know what you
autumn.
mean.
Yeah, but we have different names for them, and we have more seasons. And we celebrate those by going out in nature and foraging and learning about plant magic or plant medicine. um we believe in regular women's gatherings to support each other and share knowledge. Um,
You make it sound all very sort of warm, cuddly, fluffy, and wellness and meditation based and all that
it
sort
is,
of kind of thing. But
it
that's not
is.
how most people think of witchcraft. I mean, when I Google definition of witch, it says a person thought to have magic powers, especially ones popularly depicted as a woman wearing a black cloak. And it talks about flying on a broomstick, and it talks about, but what the thing that is over and over repeated about witchcraft is it's the use of magic to do really bad things. I mean, to bring misfortune to other people. That's the sort of popular, I think, conception of
It's not, it's
witchcraft.
not, it's not the popular conception. It's the conception that was created by men in the 13th century to remove women from positions of power. It was created by patriarchal religion. And that's the really dark side of witchcraft. Witches don't, they never wore pointy hats and flew on broomsticks. That was something that was created by a German man who wrote the Malleus Maleficarum, which is called the Hammer of Witches. It's and it basically was written and distributed by the church to undermine and remove women from being the leaders of tribes, because women historically used to create medicine and used to lead tribes historically.
Yes.
So they were shamans. I mean, men did as well, but predominantly it was women. And this whole absolute paranoia in patriarchal religion of about demons and Satan, that's a Christian based deity, never someone that was believed by witches. Um, they pinned that all on women. They said that women were evil and that they were
But it seems to have stuck though, doesn't it? Because I mean, you took men will say, "Oh, don't marry that witch," that
yeah,
or
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
it
that
was a
sort of thing.
really popular, it was a really, really popular religion. And, it came out in a time when people were really paranoid about evil. I visited Creswell Crags recently, which is like a cave area in the sort of Midlands area. And you got a real sense of what Victorian life was like, because you had this beautiful town in a valley where the sun was hitting, where they had loads of crops, and then this big sort of like cavernous cave area, which they were obsessed was to do with evil. And the people used to go into the cave and they used to make these marks that they thought could trap the devil or trap witches. And it's so obsessive that there's thousands of these symbols as you move into the part of the cave. They were terrified, but that rhetoric was created by men and perpetuated by men to villainize women. And it's an issue that we are still suffering with today, because women are still burnt alive in places like India and Africa and New Guinea for being witches.
Oh my
And
God.
we just don't believe in Satan. We never have done. You know, that is a Christian-based deity.
So,
And
so what you're saying is it was a propaganda campaign.
it was a
Um,
huge smear campaign, but in
so,
the worst sense. Thousands, 9 million people were killed because of witchcraft. They were sentenced to death because of witchcraft in the most horrific ways. And we talk a lot about Salem. There was only about 24 people that were killed in Salem. If you go to Germany and you go to Scotland, it was thousands.
well,
Thousands of women, men, and children were killed, and they were pushed into accusing each other out of fear. So there's this thing called the witch wound, and it's basically where these men in these positions of power made neighbors turn on their neighbors in order to not get accused themselves, which is what we saw through the pandemic with COVID. It's what the government was doing with COVID. They was telling people to tell on their neighbors if
well, it's
they were
happened
having
throughout history, hasn't it? I mean, that's what happened.
exactly.
That's what happened in Nazi Germany. I mean,
So the idea of witchcraft being extremely removed and sort of like a bit mad, and women being a bit mad, this is all rhetoric that's been
hmm.
created by the church.
But
And actually,
do you agree that, sorry to cut across you, but do you agree that you've still got quite a big education program to pursue here? Because, as I say, when I was doing this research, uh, everything that came up was about sort of like malevolent magic and
yeah,
the broomstick sort of stuff. And even Wikipedia, if you go on Wikipedia, it talks about witchcraft meaning magic or using supernatural powers to inflict harm or misfortune. Um, and it regards it as a common meaning, commonly understood meaning of witchcraft, and it talks about malevolent magic. So that still seems to be front and center, whereas all this stuff that you're talking about, the moon and nature and really quite beautiful things that you're talking about,
well, this re
I didn't come across that at all.
this re well, you're looking in the wrong places, because this re-education movement is huge. It's
Mm,
huge.
okay.
People all over the world, not just women, people all over the world are reclaiming the title witch and choosing this much more natural earth-based religion. And educating online is a huge thing on social media. If you went onto Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, it's huge. But the thing is like you say, the smear campaign is so deep, it runs so deep, that this process of re-educating is a massive responsibility. And let's go on to this topic of magic, because I think
Mhm.
that that's a really important one. So just quickly to explain the difference in the spelling of magic. Magic with a C, like we all know it, is actually relating to entertainment. So someone doing a magic trick, like a magician. And magic with a C is ceremonial. So it's more, so it's what is related to witchcraft, or what is related to paganism, druidism, because it's to separate entertainment from this form of ritual and ceremony that is actually much more formal, and is a real thing. It's so, just to be clear, witches don't believe that they have like magical powers. It's more this idea of enchantment. It's this idea of being enchanted by the natural environment around you, recognizing that these plants are sentient and they can create this amazing medicine. Wherever we have ailments in nature, wherever we have diseases, there is a plant alternative that can create medicine. All of our pharmaceuticals derived from plants or, natural properties. The only reason why the pharmaceutical industry is so massive is because it's monetized, and you can't patent anything that's made out of plants. You legally can't. So all of these amazing natural alternatives can't be monetized in the same way that pharmaceuticals can. So there's been this huge smear campaign since the dawn of time to make people think that it's not a thing that works. That it's part of this it's part of this process of undermining women in positions of power. Since the dawn of time, they've basically said, so the way that witchcraft is still affecting us now is herbalism and holistic alternative therapies are considered woo-woo because they can't be monetized in the same way. So we know that paracetamol derives from willow bark, right?
I didn't know that, but okay, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, it does. It derives from willow bark. A cancer cure is turkey tail mushroom. But the leading mycologist in the world is not allowed to talk about it because it jeopardizes the pharmaceutical industry in a way that like financially will impact billions in the economy. So the American government actually have the ability to remove PhDs. They can remove certification from these mycologists, these doctors, because it damages their ability to sell drugs. And I understand that it's a powerful industry, and I do understand that drugs have their place. I'm not here to say you shouldn't take antibiotics if you're in a position where you need to take them. I think medicine is amazing and it has its place, but we're thrown medicine all the time without considering drinking enough water, doing enough exercise, looking at diet, looking at holistic approaches, mindfulness, way before we pick up that medicine. And
you said that all pharmaceuticals derive from plants. So do antibiotics derive from plants?
I'm sure that they do. I'm sure they do.
Okay.
So sorry, just to get back onto
Yeah, go ahead.
the sort of like the magic aspect. We don't think that we have magic powers. It's intention-based living. So rather than fumbling through life going, oh, why are these things happening to me? Everything's going wrong. Like, it's actually taking charge and deciding to have purpose in your day, wake up and purposefully do things that lead to a goal that you want to have. We see a lot of powerful leaders talk about this in a non-witchcraft way, and it's exactly the same thing. But we just do things in a more cyclical nature. And there is a time for doing everything, and we recognize, just like our menstrual cycle, the moon cycles, there is a time for action and there is a time for rest. So if we think about the moon cycles, when we're in a new moon, the darkest point in the moon cycle, we're in preparation mode. We're ready to make plans. We're thinking about goals. We're thinking about starting projects. And when we come to the full moon's phase, the illuminating phase, that is when we rest, reflect, and consider how how our projects have gone. And it's exactly the same for the whole year. Everything is cyclical. So we're doing that through the process of the season. You're coming up into spring where people are making love and they're making children and they're getting pregnant and everything like that. This might mean sort of like pregnancy, or it might mean projects. It might mean the start of projects. And then you come into summer and it's in its full fruition. You're seeing all of your goals come alive. You're seeing your projects really expand. Your thinking is expansive. Then you move into autumn where you're preparing for rest. You're celebrating the new year with Samhain. And then you're moving into Yule, which is this really beautiful time of, we're coming into the longest day of night, which means that the sun is going to increase every day after until we move into Imbolc in the new year, and then spring starts and things start to grow again. Is this making sense?
It makes a lot of sense to me. But I mean, I'm just wondering what this has to do with the word witch. That's the thing that's sort of going through my mind.
Witchcraft is an earth-based religion. It's living in tune with nature.
But there are lots of things. I mean, as you know, I've just come back from a Nile cruise where I saw the pyramids and all that sort of thing, and I got really quite into the whole ancient Egyptian life. And
Mm.
they talk about uh, when I say they talk about in their depictions, you can see the kind of things you're talking about there. You know, they were trying to make sense. I mean, we're talking thousands of years before the birth of Christ here in terms of time, and they were in their own way trying to make sense of human existence. And they were a lot of what they did was relating to the harvest, you know, the seasons, the cycles that you're talking about that happened every year, and you know, they worshipped creatures, animals, and made these sort of composites of animals and human figures, and then they created these god figures. Where am I going with this? What I'm
I
saying
think
is
it's
that
wild.
you
I
can
think it's
talk, yeah,
wild
you
in a
can
good
talk
way.
about all these things like the moon and the cycles, and you know, which all make a lot of sense to me, but I just don't see what the connection is with the word witch. That's what I'm struggling to understand.
Well, I think the word witch is a reclaiming, it's probably a slightly feminist reclaiming of a word that oppressed women over centuries, you know?
But what do you know anything about the derivation? I mean, where that word originated from, and do we have any knowledge around that?
No, I mean, I know. I mean, I'm not professing to know everything. Like,
Hmm.
you know, witch is just a label, isn't it? It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be. You could be pagan, druid. You could be, um, um, you know, there are other word like bruja. I think that's a sort of like more Spanish name for it. Um, I just connected with the word witch because I feel a lot of pain over all of those people that suffered for literally no reason, you know. Now I feel like it's a reclaiming and it's a wanting to rewrite history. I know you can't rewrite it, but it's a not allowing that name to die with all those people that died, you know,
Can
and
men
still die.
be witch, or is it unique to women?
Yes. No, yes, of course they can. And that's a really interesting subject because it's something that we want to talk about on the podcast because witchcraft has become very exclusive to women, and it's absolutely not. It's never been exclusive to women. Men have always practiced witchcraft as well. Um, and I think the problem is with the rise of domestic violence and what's happened in the past, there is this need for women-only spaces, and that feels like it's excluding men. But you know, a lot of this, what happened in the past, was done to women, and then we're seeing in modern, you know, modern society, we're seeing this massive increase, sorry, in domestic violence against women, and I think that women come to witchcraft out of a place of needing healing, because a lot of what witchcraft is about is slowing down and reconnecting with the earth, because modern society has completely disconnected. Even if we look at veganism, Dad, which you'll connect with, this idea that an animal isn't an animal and it's just a product and it gets slapped into some plastic and you buy it in the supermarket is a disconnect from nature.
Yes,
It's
I
a
agree.
disconnect from the fact that an animal is a sentient creature, and you and I have spoken to this about this before, but it's not just about animals, it's about everything. It's
Mm.
about plants, it's about the environment, our soil degradation, is that the right word?
Yes, degradation. Yeah, definitely.
Our soil is so depleted of minerals because of the way that we're abusing it all the time. And you know, it's the same with plants. The way that we harvest plants is so deeply disrespectful, you know. And there's all of this information and science around how trees communicate through their roots underground, and plants, you know, they're communicating with each other in the way that they grow. It's scientific, it's not woo-woo stuff that's been made up. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah,
And
that would require a whole different episode to discuss what you just said with regard to veganism, and then
yeah,
getting into the area of looking
but
at
I'm talking
plants.
about
Yeah.
I'm talking about the disconnect between us as humans and nature, and how we have created these concrete, you know, these, I don't want to say concrete jungles, but these concrete areas, and we're shutting out nature by putting double glazing on our windows, sorry, you know, and we are you know, we're shutting out the natural world, and it's actually to our detriment, you know. There's all these healing techniques about forest bathing, you know, getting out in the woods and smelling the natural green smells, getting all that oxygen from the trees. There's a thing called earthing where you literally take your shoes and your socks off and you put your feet on the ground. And, you know, there's some science around how the ground actually communicates with your skin, and it's giving your skin what it needs. And, you know, the Native Americans said one of the worst things that Western society did was make shoes and put rubber in between our feet and the natural land. That's where the
Mm.
disconnect started. This is all really, this stuff sings to my soul.
Oh well,
It is,
you put it across absolutely beautifully, and I could listen to this for a long time. So does magic in these terms sort of equal medicine? Is that the feeling I'm
I
getting?
think so. I think
Yeah.
so. I
Okay.
think that it, you know, like I said, a lot of people come to witchcraft because they are healing.
Mm.
And just for a bit of context, my friend Steph and I, this is her business, but I support her with it in being a facilitator. We run a membership program for 130 women. It is a women only space because of the healing process. But what we do is we run these sessions that are healing. You know, we've got 2 retreats coming up. We've got one coming up in summer around Lunasar. It's in July. That's when that Sabbath is celebrated, and we've got one around Samhain in October, and both events have sold out within 2 weeks.
Mm.
You know, and that's these aren't our first retreats. We've done one last year which sold out as well. But there's this huge need for people to slow down and reconnect, and you know, a slow craft, like making things with your hands is part of that. So we do a lot of like crafting as well. Um, and just sort of like understanding a bit more about the natural world. Like there's a thing called animism, which is believing everything has a spirit. So when we look at these running streams and we look at these ancient rock faces, we believe that they hold energy.
Is
You
it
know,
a
they
would you describe it as a religion?
witchcraft isn't a religion, but
Hmm.
there is Wicca. Wicca is a religion. So there are people that follow it as a religious path. I don't.
Right.
So so Wiccans, it's kind of more of a new age religion. I can't remember when it came in. I want to say like the 60s. Um, and but because of Gerald Gardner, it's called like Gardner religion. And basically they worship um the goddess and the god, or they sort of like give offerings to deities. I don't believe in that,
Mm.
but there are a lot of categories for witchcraft. So someone might say, well, I'm a lunar witch because all of my focus on my practice is to do with the moon. And you know, someone might say, well, I'm an elemental witch. It's the thing with animism, like I believe everything has a spirit. My chosen path is ancestral, which probably wouldn't come as any surprise to you because I'm so obsessed with our heritage and our family tree and where our family originated from, and you know where they've, you know, I found it fascinating that you found out that you know, part of our family is descendant from Iceland, which is
Mm.
not really that unusual because a lot of the UK is descendant from Norway because of, you know,
Mm.
Viking trading and stuff like that. But you know, I'm absolutely obsessed with um obsessed is the wrong word. I'm infused by and energized by this idea of our family path, and you know what we created in our lives and how that's impacted who we are today, and whether there's been any bloodline trauma that's been handed down, and why that is, and how we heal that and how we move through it. And I have an altar space. That word might feel
Yes, I heard
uncomfortable.
you mention that on the podcast because that does sound like a religion, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, some people might feel uncomfortable with that word. I think what I'm learning about witchcraft with lots of subjects is people are triggered by certain words. Like they won't like the word witch, for instance. They won't like the word ritual. They won't like the word ceremony. They won't like the word deity. An altar, if we remove that space, we could just say it's an area of where I will have candles and I might sit and I might like to meditate. For instance, I might like to meditate on what my intention is for the day, but I also have photos of our my grandparents on there.
Yes,
all of them.
I heard you mention that. It was very, very touching, the things that you said. Little Tone, we've run out of time.
Oh, wow.
I've been
Part one.
fascinated by what you've said. I've really learned a lot from this. How do people find your podcast? Embracing
So
Magic?
the Practising Magic podcast, it's on YouTube. It's a videoed podcast. It's quite beautiful to watch, actually. Our friend
Oh,
Stevie, Steph's partner, does it. But also on all major platforms. So yeah, Spotify.
brilliant. Oh, I wish I'd known that it was on YouTube. I would have watched it rather than just listened to it because I like to see the visuals as well. But anyway, thank you very much for this. This has been really fascinating. I've loved it, and I hope that people will learn more about this because I certainly want to learn more about it, and that's just great. So do spread the word. Hopefully this has been part of your education program, which is clearly necessary here. Love you very much, darling, and goodbye to all our listeners, and we'll see you next time.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
everyone. Bye for now.